tribal people since time began. Mendocino Women's Political Coalition wished to offer recognition and respect to counter the doctrine of discovery and respect to counter that discovery with the true story of the original tribal people who are here, and to support the reconciliation of a government-to-government relationship of these sovereign nations. We are surrounded by their traditional ancestral territory, and we must strive to understand the spiritual knowledge that First Nations people carry. Their strong cultural values have enabled First Nations resiliency to survive. Read by myself, Redwood Flower, youngest daughter of the late Chief Ukiah of the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. The events of the evening will flow like this. First, there will be a discussion of ballot measure O, and then ballot measure P, and then the candidates will come up. Starting off, I'd like to introduce Michelle Savoy, President of the Ukiah Valley Friends of the Library, and she will also share with us any impact on our taxes that the measure will have.
Thank you very much for inviting someone from the Citizens Committee to be here for Measure O. Particularly want to thank the Mendocino Women's Political Coalition and the American Association of University Women. So Measure O is a very strong and simple measure. It has three parts to it. The first part is a renewal of and a continuation and making permanent the 1/8 cent sales tax that we currently have. And the main reason for doing that is to ensure that we don't lose that very important funding. That funding makes up about 2/3 of the current budget. I'll give you a couple of quick statistics on it. In 2011, before that went into place, the library items checked out was 173,408. Last year, library items checked out 404,156. Just having that money has made a huge difference. The full-time employees in 2011, 17 full-time employees. 2022, 34 full-time employees. So keeping that 1/8 of a cent and making it permanent is paramount to keeping the libraries open and running the way they're running today. The second part of Measure O picks up 1/8 of a cent from a rollover tax. It does not increase your taxes. It just picks it up like from bucket A and puts it into bucket B, and bucket B is labeled the library. So that money carries us forward and makes all the difference in what we can currently do. As an example, matching grants. We just received a $247,000 grant from the California Library Association, and that will go towards things like the new roof at the Willits Library, but it's a matching grant. Now, where we would find $250,000 in the current budget, I don't know, but if Measure O passes, then that money is there, because part of the important thing that Measure O does is it sets aside 40% for capital improvements. So things like new roofs, heating and cooling systems, library renovations, expansions, that all then has a funding stream. So that gives you the money that you need for matching grants going forward. So it's really a fairly simple measure. It's 1/8 that we currently have, making it permanent, an additional 1/8 picking up and rolling over, and setting aside 40% for the capital improvements that will take us into the next 10 years and 20 years of the libraries that we need going forward. So that's really it. Are there questions? Yes. Okay, so there's three 1/8 of a cent tax that is, shall we say, expiring or available. So the library is asking for 1/8. Okay, so we're asking for a small percentage of it. And then measure P, I believe it's asking for the remainder portion of it, which would be 1/4. Any other questions? So basically, it does not give you a net tax increase, but it guarantees the futures of the library going forward. That Sure. So Fort Bragg Library is too small and the county doesn't really have the money to assist. So in doing these major renovations and expansions, it takes a three-part approach. It takes the community, it takes the county, and it takes the city. So Fort Bragg right now has raised a lot of money through the Friends organizations. They've purchased the land next to it. They've started in on the design of the building, but the funding to actually make the building that's a lot of money. And I think it's unreasonable to expect that the Friends organizations will raise that much money. So this gives a funding stream to make that possible. Laytonville wants to have a library and they're working very hard to get things, done in that direction. But again, the Friends group in Laytonville can't raise that kind of money on used book sales. So the county needs to put in some money. These are all things that take multiple, community and city and county working together to raise enough money to make it happen. Okay, I guess that's it then. I've said my piece. Vote for Measure O. And also, I'm going to put in a little plug for Measure P because I think it's a good measure too. So vote for Measure O, vote for Measure P, and no tax increase.
Jill. I'd like to invite Maureen Mulheron of Mendocino County Supervisor, Scotty Craddy, and Redwood Valley Fire Chief Carrie Robinson up to the front to discuss the countywide ballot measure P. Well. Scott Craddy and Maureen Mulheron.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you this evening. I'm Mo Mulhern. I'm the second district supervisor for the County of Mendocino, and we are here this evening to introduce you to Measure P. As Wendy mentioned, I'm joined by Chief of Fire for Redwood Valley, Calpella, Chief Robinson, and Scott Craddy, the Executive Director of the Mendocino Fire Safe Council. Measure P is a 1/4 cent sales tax measure that will be on your ballot this November. And it will be replacing a sunsetting portion of the Measure B funds. For 5 years, the Measure B fund set aside funding for capital improvements. And now that it's been 5 years, that tax is set to sunset next year, 2023. The county has been able to use those funds to build a crisis residential treatment center, a regional behavioral health training center, and the PUF is currently under design. Those funds have also been used to create the crisis outreach teams in our community and produce a mental health stigma reduction campaign and community awareness campaign. So I'm particularly proud of the work that the fire departments did in negotiating what would become our current proposal for the use of the Measure P funds. So this is a quarter cent. It's estimated to be roughly $4.6 million per year. Each of the 21 fire departments have met and discussed that they'd like to divide those funds based on the Prop 172 allocations. And 40% of that will go divided equally amongst the fire departments, and 60% would be divided on a per capita basis. So that's 90% of those funds, and then the other 10% would go to the Mendocino Fire Safe Council. So I'm going to let Chief Robinson talk a little bit about what they would be able to do with those types of funds, and then let Scott take it.
My name is Kerry Robinson. I am the chief of Red Valley Fire. This measure came at a wonderful time for us. You know, I became chief last year. One of the things I set out to do was a budget. We did a 10-year budget and come to realize that in a couple of years, we're going to be going in the red. And in Red Valley, we operate with quite a few volunteers and we have a paid staff. And I think we respond to over 600 calls a year. And all these things cost money. And I'm not the only department like that. There's 20 other departments. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger, but we're all running the same situation. We're having issues with keeping our budget balanced. And it's tough. It's a lot of work with training and equipment. And we have a lot of equipment that times out over a period of time and has to get replaced. So this Measure P is something that is going to fit into what we were hoping to get. The other aspect of it was, you know, whether or not we were going to go for a parcel tax, and we really didn't want to do that because it was going to cost every property owner in Red Valley more money. So when this measure came along at no cost to all the people in Mendocino County, not just Red Valley, but all of Mendocino County, it's a huge benefit to all the fire services, and it's a great opportunity for everybody to help out with fire departments by voting yes for Measure P.
And to jump in, so yeah, this is the sort of no pain way to do essential support for fire services, and more importantly, to start work on mitigation, which I'll get to in a sec. But for what is just a quick thing on the fire departments, I mean, there's tremendously different, all the departments, and they have tremendously different needs. From Westport, which covers 209 square miles and has had an average budget of about $70,000 a year. Half of that is coming from fundraising. So they desperately need help. They had to apply for a grant just to buy chainsaws to be able to help do clearing for folks there. On the other end of the spectrum is Ukiah, and in Ukiah, you know, one of the things that's important to everybody here is how much you pay for homeowners insurance, and that's determined by the ISO, the Insurance Service Office rating for your fire department, and how that gets set depends on how much equipment they have, for one thing. So Ukiahans pay more for insurance because the Ukiah department hasn't been able to afford backup units for its major engines. So this is the kind of thing that we get to move to with that. So, you know, every place in the county, there are different levels of need, different kinds of need that are going to be met, but the needs are extreme everywhere. And the prices have been skyrocketing. Just the workman's comp that they have to pay for those volunteers has been doubling as the years go by, and you can't keep up with that with barbecues. And beyond that, mitigation, super important. You know, decades ago, we realized that earthquakes are part of life in California, and we started adapting to them. Well, guess what? Wildfires are part of life in California, and we haven't been adapting to them. And it's time for us to step back and catch up. And the good news is there's a ton of stuff we can do and a ton of resources available. There are literally billions of dollars coming down the line potentially for mitigation programs. But if Mendocino County does not have a funded group and plans in place for getting those monies are going to go elsewhere and not come here. So having a base funding for mitigation work is going to help us get to those bigger funds that are going to help people be able to do the retrofitting they need to get to. And, you know, the super important good news is by starting to educate ourselves and get those programs going, we can make a huge difference. You've probably heard the terms defensible space and home hardening. The most recent study I saw shows that if you do a really good job of defensible space, your home has a 40% better chance of surviving that wildfire. And if you do home hardening and defensible space, your home has a 75% better chance of surviving that wildfire. So, this is our chance to start building programs around those projects that need to happen, making sure the education happens, because it's not just you, it's also your neighbor. If your neighbor's home doesn't survive the wildfire, the chances of your home not surviving go way down. So we need to do this as a community. I can do it. I'll give it a shot. So, on the back table, you'll see there's a really specific agreed to matrix. And part of this, my take on this is a balance between getting it done, because taking multiple years to go for a 2/3 tax vote and all the effort around that probably wouldn't happen. So the fire department wouldn't get help if we go that route. This is a route that allows it to happen with a 50% vote. So it makes it practical to actually happen. And the supervisors paired that with a resolution that specifically spells out exactly how the money is supposed to be spent, and also calls on the county to issue a report each year reporting on how it was spent. So, is it the best possible thing? Is it locked in? No. Is how it's supposed to be locked in super clear to everybody and going to be really easy for us to all monitor? Yes. And the Fire Safe Council and 21 fire chiefs are going to build it into their budget the moment it passes. So if it doesn't come, you will hear the shouting.
I don't know what, do you do? Okay, good, because I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the Ukiah Valley Fire Authority did recently annex the city of Ukiah. So just even a few years ago, the two departments were working on a merger. So that property tax assessment will be in effect. This tax is a sales tax measure that would supplant the sunsetting Measure B funds to add additional funds to all of the fire departments. And just so everybody knows, there is a website, yesonpmendo.com, that has the breakdowns of what those funds would look like. And it's also in the back of the room. So Ukiah Valley would receive quite a bit of the funds, but they also have the largest per capita need, as it's the county seat, and increases to a population of 30,000 during the workday. And Ukiah Valley, Fire District covers quite a large range. Yes, Ukiah is one of the 21 fire departments that are listed in the Measure P allocations, so they would. Well, to Ukiah Valley specifically? Sure. Well, so I want to be very clear that the fire chiefs have all agreed that this allocation is a fair allocation. And again, as I mentioned, 40% of it goes based on each of the fire departments. So they would all get roughly $76,000, which, as I think Scott described, Westport's entire budget is $70,000. So they're going to double their funds. Ukiah and Fort Bragg are our largest jurisdiction. So when you break down that per capita, as is mentioned on the sheet in the back, it's about $1 million for Ukiah, which, as Scott mentioned, again, that would be used to buy backup equipment so that they have extra equipment on their roster when they're looking at their ISO rating. Fort Bragg, which is also kind of a merged district with the city and the rural Fort Bragg, is about $500,000, 573. That's the estimate. A smaller district like Chief Robinson's district in Redwood Valley, Calpella, is $271,000, which is, $250,000, quite a bit for a small district like that. Yeah. Yeah, so all of those numbers are in the back. We're happy to tell you which fire department gets what. Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely.
Runs a lot of calls and they're in need of people to be on their department. I know those guys are busy. I know I've come in a couple of times with mutual aid for Ukiah. Ukiah comes out and helps us out with things, but it's a huge cost for these guys to operate in the way they do. And Ukiah seems to be growing, and the whole area around Ukiah is growing as well. And they cover a great big area. So
Yeah, I'll add one more point of clarification. So although Redwood Valley, sorry, Wendy, Redwood Valley decided not to go after a property tax assessment this time, I believe that Hopland is. They have a ballot measure that'll also be on the ballot. And the city of Ukiah decided to do that annexation with Ukiah Valley Fire District before this conversation about Measure P and what those funds could potentially do. So city of Ukiah and the Ukiah Valley Fire District had already worked towards trying to come up with a solution for their area. And really in my mind, and I'm a city resident too, but what this does is helps our smaller, more rural departments be able to get some funding because they're mostly staffed by volunteers and the equipment is expensive, as was mentioned. So for me, and I think I would say also for Chief Hutchins in the Ukiah Valley Fire Authority, this is really a campaign that can support our smaller, more rural neighbors.
Is there a timeline on its duration?
Yeah, it's going to have a 10-year sunset. So this is also part of the accountability that was built into it so that the citizens could closely watch the board and make sure, the board of supervisors, and make sure that the funding was going exactly where they voted and where it was allocated to go.
Once these funds are used to purchase backup equipment for our local fire departments, is there a possibility that our insurance rates might go down then?
That's the hope. That's the goal. That's why, you know, when the chiefs discussed this funding and saw the breakdown of the numbers, they kind of talked about what that would mean for their department. And for Ukiah and the Ukiah Valley Fire Authority, they didn't want to add on additional staffing with a 10-year sunset, maybe potentially have to lay people off. So they started looking at what were alternative solutions, and having equipment, robust backup equipment, and maintaining their current equipment really seemed like the way they wanted to best invest these funds.
Yeah, just a quick add on to that. I mean, so if you don't subscribe to it, subscribe to the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council newsletter. There's one coming out tomorrow morning that's going to have a lot of information about insurance and the direction that's going on there. And there are several new requirements coming down from the state that are going to make you make some significant modifications to your home if you want to keep your insurance or get a good rating. And that's another reason we need this measure, is to be able to start doing the mitigation work and start building programs that assist people with those kinds of changes that are coming.
How would one subscribe to that newsletter?
You go to firesafemendocino.org and subscribe.
Any other questions?
Is that who you refer to? If I live in Auckland, would I have a choice of N or P? Or do I vote both? Do I vote to get taxed twice?
Well, if I lived in Hopland, I would vote yes on both. Measure N is going to be a property tax assessment. And again, Measure P is a sales tax that we all currently pay that's about to sunset. So it's really just an attempt to reallocate those funds for fire departments and fire safe prevention.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Measure P help the fire department some without increasing sales taxes. Does that mean the fire departments are done with funding and aren't going to need any more? You know, probably not. Some of the departments are still going for more because things are changing a lot. There are a lot of the departments, for example, that have been all volunteer through their entire history are having trouble recruiting young volunteers anymore. And they're finding the only way to remain feasible is to start having some paid staff. Those departments are going to be looking for other ways to be able to maintain the funding needed to do that. P is super important to keep them going, but it doesn't mean that all our fire problems are solved and they've got all the money they need.
Departments are operating on a parcel tax that was over 20 years ago that was established. So based on those budgets, it doesn't quite compute in this time and day because of the cost of things. So we're working hard at other measures too to get revenue for our departments. We're not just looking at one thing to solely fix our situation, but we're looking at other opportunities, good grants and and other opportunities that we have. It's a constant visual that we have to keep up to make sure that we're getting the money to take care of our communities.
Question for our panel?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you want a complete breakdown of that, there's a nice handy chart on the table back there that shows the existing tax and exactly where it would go and then what would happen in 10 years when P sunsets. So. Right.
Correct. I also want to be clear. So Measure B sunsetted a portion that was set aside for capital needs, and we still have Measure B. You will still hear how the Board of Supervisors is using Measure B funding because there is an extended allocation of 0.25% for services. Yeah. Yes, please visit the website, yesonpmendo.com, and share this data and information with your friends that may not be here tonight because it really is an important measure.
And if you want to endorse, we have endorsement forms in the back of the room too. There you go.
Please show your appreciation for Carrie Robinson, Scott Craddy, and Marie Mullern for joining us tonight. We'll take a moment for updating our name tags. And while that's happening, as we prepare for our candidates for City Council, I'll share with you how the process will work. We have index cards. And if you have a question that you would like addressed this evening, please fill out an index card. You may ask more than one question. If there's a lot on your mind, please fill out, just include all the questions. Raise your hand when you have a card that you would like picked up. There are volunteers circulating in the room. And if you think of another question, raise your hand and get another card. But all questions will be submitted via the index cards, and then I will address the candidates. Some of the questions may be similar. So, where was I? Some of the questions may be duplicates. So if your question is not directly quoted, just know that we may, if there's a similar batch of questions, they will be grouped as one. The general idea being that we get out as much information as possible and do our best of picking the brains of our candidates as we can in the time available. So we look like we are ready. I'd like to welcome to the podium Jim Brown, Juan Orozco, Mari Roden, Susan Shur, and Tal Fee. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for an opening statement and 2 minutes for a closing statement. Questions from the audience will be submitted on the cards. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. If another candidate has a rebuttal to that answer, they don't have to, but they may. And then that will be a minute also. We'll rotate the questioning so the same person is not always the first to answer. And again, please fill out the cards, raise your hand, and the card will be retrieved. Try to do this early so we can get them organized and it'll make the process go smoother. Thank you so much. So are we ready to begin? Thank you so much for coming tonight. We'll start with Mr. Jim Brown.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. It's a great opportunity to meet the candidates who are running for the city council. My name is Jim Brown. Most people recognize me as Jim O. Brown. I'm a Ukiah born, Ukiah High School graduate, lived here all my life. I have a love for Ukiah. Probably started when I was romping through the creek across the street from my house, and I continue to romp through that same creek in the house I grew up in. Since being elected in 2014, I have found a importance it is to have a strong economic growth in Ukiah. Strong economic growth promotes a healthy community, strong public safety, a sound infrastructure, as you have witnessed with all the streets that are being repaired around the town, the undergrounding of wiring, and also promotes a vibrant recreation opportunities, especially for our youth. Our youth are available to play any sport almost year round, and we have many scholarships for those who are disadvantaged and can't afford to participate in those sports. I'm on many standing committees and ad hocs. I was very involved in the fire authority merger, very involved in the marijuana legislation process that we now operate the city under. I'm very active in the water consolidation project we're presently going through, active in the annexation of Ukiah, which I think is a huge deal for the entire Ukiah Valley. Instrumental in solving the sanitation sewer district lawsuit ordeal. And I'm presently actively involved in the selection of the new police chief. I'm very, very proud of being a strong supporter of the city's diversity and equity committee. I believe they do a great job. And I think the city has done a better service to the community, promoting opportunity for all individuals and groups. There are many complex issues facing the city right now. A lot of decisions need to be made. Institutional knowledge, I think, is vitally important at this point to promote the positive growth of the Ukiah Valley. And I would welcome your vote on November 8th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim Brown. Juan Orozco?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I don't think I've ever seen so many people before in a regular city council meeting. This is great. Thank you for being here. Most of you already know me, for the 4 years that I've been in the council, but I moved to Ukiah in '97 from the Anderson Valley area. I lived in the county for a little bit over 40 years. I moved in, from Mexico without knowing a word in English as an adult already, but I learned it and got an education here. And here I am in politics now. I'm actually in education, got a teaching credential permit, and that's what I do. I teach middle school and high school students at our juvenile hall here in Ukiah. So I wanted to get into politics because there's very little representation of Latinos in our city. And I wanted to encourage others that they may be in a better position to take on those roles of leadership for their communities as they as I'm speaking of Latinos that have been born and raised here, that may be in a better position to do that, and just to show that they can also do it even better than some of us that have come way later in their lives around here. But I just want to say that for the 4 years that I've been in the council, I feel that there's a better representation of the residents that we have in our city, in a better representation in the city council, and we want to keep it that way if if possible. So we don't want to go backwards. If possible, keep going forward with the representation that we need to have in the council. And so Mr. Brown mentioned the diversity and equity committee that we have in the city. I'm very proud to be to be a member of that committee, and to make sure that we have the representation, and also to encourage people to a diverse group of people to be employees of the city and have those roles that everyone else enjoys having as well. And it's very important for our community, for the economy, to be open to everyone being part of this experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Orozco. Mari Roden.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I love Ukiah. It's been my home for 31 years. This amazing community has been a gift, providing the village in which I've raised two smart, hardworking, kind sons. I've started a grant writing business that has brought in over $100 million in funds to Mendocino County for programs ranging from violence prevention to homeless services to economic development. I've served a total of 13 years on Ukiah City Council, not all consecutive. This experience gives me in-depth knowledge of city operations, staff, issues, and importantly, knowledge of how best to move policy issues through the council process. We need proven leaders on our city council, individuals with a vision for the future and the ability to get us there. I'm honored, truly, I really am honored to be serving as one of your city council members. It would be a privilege to continue serving you. Thank you.
Susan Shur.
Good evening. My name is Susan Shur, and I want to just first thank MWPC for organizing this. Thank you all for coming. I've lived in Ukiah for 40 years, and I love this city. I love its unpretentious, friendly, down-home atmosphere, its beautiful physical surroundings, and its increasing diversity. I've lived in the same neighborhood for decades, and I raised my child here. I've been very involved in local climate actions to encourage bold new solutions instead of business as usual approaches. There can be no denying that climate change is happening before our very eyes. We see increasingly higher temperatures. We live with the constant fear of fire ravaging our homes and communities. So we need to be less dependent on fossil fuels that are heating the planet. Our city government can play a vital role in developing more forms of clean, renewable energy. I'm also interested in preserving our neighborhoods. All of our neighborhoods should be nurtured as attractive places for our children to grow and for all of us to feel safe. Our neighborhoods need more green spaces for walking, bicycling, and playing. We don't need them to be thoroughfares for speeding vehicles. I've spent many years organizing and advocating for my own neighborhood, the Wagon Cellar neighborhood in the northeast corner of the city. Wagon Cellar is a diverse and vibrant neighborhood, but it's been sadly neglected by the city of Ukiah. And that situation prompted me to make changes. There are so many crucial issues that require a council that's paying attention and finding creative solutions, like housing for all income levels, including the unhoused, restoring trust between our police and our community, annexing and expanding our city boundaries with thoughtful planning, just to name a few. So I worked as an attorney for 30 years representing workers in employment discrimination cases. I now work as a mediator where I assist parties in resolving disputes. That work has trained me to listen carefully and digest lots of information. I often observe city council meetings and I see how important decisions are sometimes made with little discussion. It is possible for council members and staff to have congenial relationships while at the same time engage in thoughtful debate. In fact, democracy requires that. I'm not afraid to ask tough questions, and I'll bring badly needed energy, vitality, and skills to the council. My name is Susan Shur. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan Shur. Tao Fee.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tao Fee, and I am a first-time candidate for Ukiah City Council. I am a county analyst and have been living in Mendocino County for 9 years. I have a master's in organization and leadership with over a decade of experience in education. My work has been in a variety of roles and settings, including public, private, not-for-profit, and for-profit institutions. When I first moved to Ukiah 9 years ago, I spent a lot of time at Black Oak trying to get to know townies and understand what's going on in the local scene. I became good friends with someone who's lived in Mendocino County for over 50 years and would hear stories about the local politics. My friend emphasized the importance of local politics and the impact it would have in the world around me. And that is what's greatly influenced me to get involved. I think it's time for younger generations to have a seat at the table, to form a multi-generational council, and to serve the community. Sorry. As a renter, I want to advocate for the availability of affordable housing and how affordable housing affects workforce development of Ukiah and the homelessness situation. As an educator, I want to emphasize, I want to invest in our youth. Investing in our youth's education, activities, and growth opportunities will benefit the community many times over. And as someone who loves the natural beauty of Ukiah, I would love to understand how we utilize our outdoor spaces, including parks and rec, and with consideration to those who walk and bike as well. While I would love to help serve the community, I'm also genuinely interested in learning the ins and outs of civil service and infrastructure. I hope to be of service to the city and people of Ukiah. Thank you.
And thank you, Tao Fee. Before we get started on the questions, I have a little bit of general information it would be nice to share with the audience. According to the latest census, the population by groups in our city and the political makeup of that group. So do I have a volunteer to answer that question? Just to help our audience understand who we are. The question is, According to the latest census, what is the population of Ukiah by group, if you can even have a little more detail there, and also what the political makeup of our community? Okay, just take the first part. How many of us are there? How big is the city?
Well, I can,
16,500.
16,000.
However, during the daytime hours, working hours, it grows to about 34,000.
Oh my, okay. And how about a breakdown by group or by political leaning?
well, the ethnic breakdown of the city residents is approximately 56% white, 36% Latino, and then the rest is a mix. So that's the vast majority are Latino and white. But what's interesting is that that's the whole average. But if you look at the young, school age population, Latinos represent 53% of the population, and whites are 35%. So it's almost reverse. And you can see that we have a growing, a Latino majority pretty soon. And then I think politically that Ukiah is a Democratic majority, but beyond that, I don't know anything specific.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to lay a little understanding with the community about who we are. We will now start with the questions. And since Jim Brown kicked off the introductions, we will kick off the questions with Juan Orozco. And the first question is, what is your plan for addressing housing in Ukiah?
Thank you. Housing, definitely, we need more. Glad to say that our city of Ukiah is one of the cities that is in better position in terms of housing as opposed to other cities in our state. So we're doing pretty good considering the situation with funding for housing. But I keep voicing my concerns in terms of building housing and then not having people that qualify for housing. We've had that situation several times with some of the housing that has been available for people and not getting those apartments filled because people are not qualifying. And then we have to open it to whoever can apply, or whoever hears first, I guess, to apply. And that's not a really good way to go about, because there are some people that they hear about those things first before others. The people that don't know would hear last.
Questioning will work. Since there is an opportunity for rebuttal, each candidate will be asked the question, and then if there is a rebuttal to one of the other comments, then we'll start on that round. So continuing with Mari Roden.
Well, I want to just congratulate the city of Ukiah for being one of like 8 or 13 cities in the whole state that has met its goals for low and moderate, or it's very low and low income housing. But obviously we need housing for middle income and upper income. We need the whole entire range. And the city of Ukiah has been working on that. We have gotten some CDBG grants, that's Community Development Block Grant funding to help first-time home buyers. We also, our Community Development Director, Craig Schlatter, and other community development directors from the other cities in the county, so Fort Bragg, Willits, and Point Arena, they organized a symposium, and we were talking about policies that could be implemented on a countywide basis to help encourage the development of more housing. And also there's the housing advisor, what is it, the HAT team? Oh, I'm done?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Continuing with Susan Shur.
Obviously, we need housing for all income levels. We hear stories on and on about professionals, particularly in the medical profession, who can't find housing. So we need housing for low and very low income, as well as highly paid professionals. I would also like to see any new housing incorporate clean energy saving features that would be for heating and cooling, or water heaters. And I don't see that happening with the new housing that's being constructed. We also see a lot of empty and blighted buildings, commercial buildings. We can get creative and transform those buildings into residential dwellings. I know rent control is very controversial, but I just want to put a little pitch in. I've been walking around talking to a lot of residents, and I hear constantly low income or blue collar workers who are terrified they're going to get a 10 or 20% rent increase. So I'd like to see some moderate rent control.
Thank you. And Taufi.
Echoing what Mari and Susan said, I agree that housing needs to be addressed at all levels, low income, middle income, and high income, to attract more professionals to come into the city of Ukiah and to have somewhere to be able to live. I see with younger generations, they're interested in cooperative style living, so looking into how we can use our land to build more communal style living. The land annexation is going on within Ukiah to expand how much space we have so we're able to build. And then I'm also hearing that with the land that's available and the land that's available and the resources that are available, communicating with the community so that they know they're eligible for first-time loans and that they know that there is housing available for them. Thank you.
So this next round will be for a specific rebuttal to the comment by another candidate. Did I? Oh, right. I'm sorry. Yes, Jim. Yes. Jim Brown.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the question. So, and I concur with all the other candidates. We do have a real need for affordable housing. But one thing that's paramount is that we are getting ready to adopt a 2040 general plan. And that is going to address the housing needs. And once we get that general plan adopted, it makes Ukiah eligible for many more grants, such as Mari represented, regarding CBDG and low-income housing, senior housing, and housing at all levels. So another thing that the City Council has adopted is density levels in the housing projects that we're presently building. We've approved higher density so we can build more units. Senior housing, we have found results in opening up the housing market. When seniors age out, they go to the senior housing. Some of those homes become available. So it's a very complex issue, but the city has worked very, very hard on it.
Thank you, Jim Brown. And my apologies. So this next, starting with Juan Orozco and working our way around again, strictly rebuttal. To any of the candidates? Do you have a rebuttal? Okay, we're gonna move on. It is strictly rebuttal to another candidate. Susan Shur.
From people on Section 8 housing waiting lists for, it seems like eternity. So I don't think there's enough housing readily available. There may be housing in the pipeline, but I think the waiting times are inordinate for a lot of low-income folks.
Sort of.
No, it must be strictly rebuttal, please.
Yeah, it's not that we have enough. It's just that we've met what are the targeted goals for low and very low income housing. But
Okay, we will move on to the next question. And this will start off with Mari Broden. How can you enhance our water resources to plan for future drought?
the city of Ukiah has been very forward thinking on this issue by developing wells that tap into the groundwater, which is immensely abundant in the Ukiah Valley. So we have that, and we don't really need to enhance it, because when we use water from our wells, which we have been doing in this drought, especially last year, the wells, the water level goes up overnight. So I talked to Sean White about that, and we're using a fraction of what's in our aquifer, and then it replenishes almost immediately, even during drought times. The other thing, of course, is the Potter Valley project. We have to ensure that water keeps flowing through the tunnel to supply enough water for agricultural uses. And then, of course, expanding our recycled water resource project here in the city of Ukiah.
Thank you, Mari Roden. Susan Shur.
Well, I think it's great that we have sufficient well water. It sounds like our water manager's done a great job in making that available. I am concerned, though, that there's not any message going out that water is a finite resource. And I have neighbors across the street from me who, like clockwork, every other night put their sprinklers on to make their front lawn look like a golf course. And it seems really tragic. That's what we're using water for. So I would like to see the city take a more forward-thinking approach and actually encourage water conservation, even though we have lots of well water. I was interested in where the purple pipe water is going. I couldn't find anything on the city's website. I understand the pipes are in, but the infrastructure has not been completed. So I don't, maybe someone can educate me. I don't know if the golf courses and landscaping is using purple pipe water or fresh water. I hope it's not fresh water.
It sounds like the Purple Pipe project is going very well. I read recently with 220 million gallons of water that's come in this year. So looking at how we can expand that project, I was reading recently that there's been a recycled water facility that recently opened. So checking in how that's going, that is for trucks and private citizens to use. So how are we communicating with the community that there is available recycled water to be used? Also, that recently there was voluntary water rights, an agreement between the upper Russian River and those who are using the water rights. So expanding our mutual aid, where else can we look for voluntary water rights usage and share that with our local community?
Taufi. Jim Brown.
For underneath the Ukiah Valley. It's also very fortunate that we have completed phase 3 of 4 phases of the recycled water project. Phase 4, we're hopefully going to be receiving funding within the next couple of months. That recycled water is right now being used strictly for agriculture, and there are some trucks that truck it out, but mostly for agriculture use right now. It will not be used for potable water. I would really like to see Coyote Dam get raised. I think that's a real viable solution. It would double the size of Lake Mendocino. We also have to be very concerned about the Potter Valley project, and that they do not tear down Scott Dam. At least if they do, they need to have a solution to where that water is going to come from. We need more stakeholders further down the Russian River to support us in the Potter Valley Protection Project.
Juan Orozco.
Yeah, thank you. As my counterparts explained about the water, the use of water for the city, the recycled water, that I know hasn't gotten to use it for the golf course and the public parks, but eventually that's the plan to have right now has been used for agriculture purposes. And what it will eventually do is replenish, recharge our water table for the water that we're presently using and getting out of our wells that we have. So we have plenty of water, and so we don't worry too much about it now. You know, if it keeps raining, even a little bit that is raining, we have plenty of water. But I'm also a member of the Inland Water Power Commission, and there we fight for the rights to have the rights to our water in the Potter Valley project to keep pumping the water over to the Russian River.
Thank you, Juan Orozco. And starting with Mari, is there a rebuttal to any of the previous statements? Well, we will move on. Beginning this time with Susan Shur, What are your ideas about the homeless situation in our community?
Oh, boy, in 1 minute. You know, the first thing I want to say is I know the housing first model is rather controversial. And there are some advocates who argue that we should be providing housing even if people are not clean and sober. And then other people argue that there should be a requirement if you're going to address the whole picture, people need to be treated for substance abuse and mental health issues at the same time. I'm somewhere in between. I know wraparound services that are, cost a lot of money. There should be, I understand, a lot of money pouring in from the state for more homeless services. I hope that will filter down to us. I'm interested in what's going to happen with the care courts, which is a new branch of the judicial system to get folks with serious mental health and addiction issues into treatment. I'd also like to see the city establish city-run RV parks, so RVs are not parked without services in residential neighborhoods and wreaking havoc. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Shur. And Taufi?
I know the city and its local resources has put in a lot of care, the care for the homelessness. There's the continuum of care, which is the strategic plan. Homelessness is deep rooted in substance abuse and mental health among some of the many complicated issues. So continuing to partner up with the city police and the county agencies which serve those needs. And looking at the homeless shelters and programs that we do have in town so that we consolidate our resources and that we're reducing inefficiencies. In addition to that, getting to know our homeless population because they are still part of our community and treating them as humans to understand what their actual needs are so we can work together. We've put in so many resources. Is it getting better? Let's talk to the people on the street to get a clearer idea.
Thank you, Taufi. Jim Brown?
Not going to go away. We're going to have a certain level of homelessness no matter what we do. So what we need to do is address those people who will accept help. Most of the time, that's addressing their mental health issues. And we have those resources. We know how to address mental health issues. If we can help those people get through their mental health crises and then provide them adequate housing, that's going to reduce our homelessness. I think that's our best hope. I know that the continuum of care does a pretty good job in trying to get a handle on what's going on with the mental health issues and the homeless issues. But I would like to see us address the opioid crises, the fentanyl crises, address the mental health issues, and in turn, that will help resolve a lot of the homeless issues. There's a percentage of those homeless people that are not going to change. They prefer to be homeless. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim Brown. Juan Orozco.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not a one size fits all situation. Everyone is going to have different needs, and I'm happy that that the state has passed in legislature on the care court programs that eventually it will trickle down to getting some support, getting some help, and for services for the homeless. I do believe that many of the people that are homeless are, if given the opportunity and the proper training and support, they could work, get a job. But it's really difficult when, especially if you have children that you might have lost because you can't have them out in the streets. You had to work on that first, and drug addictions as well. So there's really many needs, and we just need more services and really focus those services on the people at their level, at their individual situations that they have.
Mari Roden?
The homelessness issue isn't going to be solved by a city or even a state. I think it's a nationwide problem that has to do with mental health, service availability, addiction, service availability, and of course, poverty. And we have to keep working collaboratively with the county, especially the Department of Social Services. We have a program, the city we have a program with the Department of Social Services where by if a police officer comes in contact with a homeless individual or somebody having a mental health issue, they can call in a social worker who will come and diffuse the issue. And so we need to keep promoting that, make sure that we have enough of those social workers on hand. Also, I hope we can do another Project Home Key, which was the effort to turn a hotel into a residential space for many, many homeless people. And there's a huge waiting list. So we need to do more of that. I like Susan Shur's idea of a mobile home park but I think those would have to have services associated with them, not just a parking lot. And then finally, prevention. Most of the homeless people in this area are homegrown, and we need to get upstream
Thank you.
services.
So now beginning with Susan Shur, each candidate will have an opportunity for strictly rebuttal. Okay, we will move on to, if elected to city council or reelected, what would you do to mitigate climate change and protect our environment? And this will start with Tao Fee.
I saw that the city of Ukiah recently passed a climate emergency resolution 2022, and that in itself has a lot of really great ideas to build off of. So some of the ideas that stood out to me: increasing renewable power production and storage. So having more resources for electric, installing energy efficient lighting. Other areas that resonate with me is being green. So making Ukiah more walkable and bikeable. So that promotes less vehicle usage. Doing better with our Great Redwood Trail. Reducing fire hazards by keeping fuel vegetation cleared out. Tree management, planting more trees in the city, eliminating pesticides. So those are a few. Supporting our Ukiah Valley Fire Authority with Measure P. So those are a few different ideas to contribute to climate change.
Thank you, Tao Fee. Jim Brown.
Our climate emergency resolution did address a lot of the issues, and thank you for mentioning most of the things that are in that resolution. You were right on, and hopefully we can practice those, you know, as what's practical for the city. But in addition, I'm hoping that I'm looking at alternative green power. I mean, one of the reasons that I really supported acquisition of the Western Hills was that maybe someday that we could put wind power up there or solar panels up there to help power the city of Ukiah. We are making a move to get electric vehicles on the roads in all of our departments. It's a little tough right now because really electric vehicles are not that readily available. But I assure you, the city takes climate change very seriously. And we'll be taking whatever action we can to eliminate fossil fuels.
Thank you, Jim Brown. Juan Orozco.
Thank you. That's one of my, most important things that I look at. Probably second, water is one, the first, but climate change definitely. And I want to see more people, if they can, purchase vehicles that are electric vehicles. We need to have plant more trees, and alternative energy production that is not, fossil fuel, and just in general, have a better, healthier community by reducing the use of fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Orozco. Maria Roden.
Well, I'm really proud that the city council passed the climate emergency resolution recently, and I want to stay on top of all the implementation measures that are in it. We also just a few months ago passed, it's the ability for City of Ukiah residents to use 100% green energy, electric energy, and you can choose to do that. It's maybe $10 more every month to do that, so that's a benefit. My passion, however, I want to save my 22 seconds I have left on my passion, which is complete streets. And that has to do with, making streets, which are public space. They aren't just for car owners, but making them accessible and safe for all users of all ages, and whether or not they're on bicycles or pedestrians. that we should have wider sidewalks. We need to have wide, safe bike lanes and see children riding to school so that it really is inviting to get out of our cars and enjoy our community.
Thank you, Mari Roden. Susan Shur.
And I couldn't agree more. As an active member of a local group called Climate Action Mendocino, I actually I wrote the first draft of the climate emergency resolution. And we modeled it after a bunch of Sonoma County cities, but we also attached action items, which a lot of those cities did not have. So it gives the city a great blueprint. There are 4 pages of action items. Some of them are aspirational, but others are very doable. And I'd like to see any future public works projects be filtered through the lens of the climate emergency declaration. I've seen, unfortunately, since the council passed it, there have been some public works projects that were a little bit iffy about whether or not they're actually following the climate emergency declaration. And, you know, when you look at climate, we have to address the underlying cause, which is primarily fossil fuel emissions, with dealing with the effects of climate change at the same time, like Measure P. So we need to be ready for fires. Okay.
Thank you. And beginning with Taufi, rebuttal. Okay, thank you. Moving right along to beginning with Jim Brown, your ideas on how to keep young people in our community. When they graduate high school, how do we make them want to stay?
Thank you for the question. I guess the answer is, look at me for an example. I mean, I grew up in this community. I stayed in this community. I thrive in this community. I retired from the county in this community. It's make the community interesting. Let them grow up healthy, provide them a good education. We have to provide them jobs that they can be connected with and love. And we also need to give them affordable housing so they can stay here. I think that our education system in Ukiah is very, very good. Obviously, it's a beautiful place to live. It's amazing how many people do live in Ukiah, leave, and then come back. So I guess we just smart economic growth, job security, affordable housing, all the things that we've talked about will keep our young people here.
Thank you, Jim Brown. Roscoe.
Thank you. Definitely, money is important. So jobs and affordable, not affordable, but good paying jobs for young people to stick around, and housing. Another thing that we hear young people that we don't have enough of is fun things for them to do. You know, we have space, and thank you for having that School of Performing Arts, Cultural Education in Ukiah, but we need more. We need more things for young people to do. And I, you know, we do lose a lot of people to the big cities for wages and fun things to do. And I believe we need to address those things to keep young people around. Thank you.
Thank you, Juana Roscoe. Mari Roden.
I don't think I have anything novel to add. I think it really is about work opportunities and affordable housing. But it's more increasingly possible for people to be employed elsewhere, but in one place and living in another place. I think, I know at least one of my kids sometimes talks about coming back here, but it really has to do with finding affordable housing. And I think the other thing is that there's an amazing cohort of young people here. Many of them came as AmeriCorps volunteers and fell in love with this place, thanks to Ann Mulgar, which is probably the #1 employer of AmeriCorps volunteers over the last 10 years. And many of them have stayed and become members of this community. And so there are, I think there's a community of young people, and that is something that would draw our young people back here.
Thank you, Mari Roden. Susan Shur.
lot of meetings, the average age of the participants is about 70. And I wonder, where are all the young people? But I think young people are going to be forming their own organizations, their own areas of interest that they're not attracted often to what older people are doing. I think whether we like it or not, cannabis has been a draw for a lot of young people. There's a wonderful food farming movement that's bringing a lot of people here. The college has a great sustainability building program that's, to my knowledge, is all young people or most. I understand there are some high school internships in businesses going on. And I know quite a few young people who have come back here and are actually teaching or substituting in our public schools. So there seems to be a little trickle of migration moving back. And I just hope that young people will find their own forums.
Thank you, Susan.
you.
Sure. Chao-Fee.
I'm going to start with young people before they're 18. Just looking at young people. So Ukiah, like the other candidates have said, Ukiah has a lot of good things to offer for people and families who want to live here. And we also have to look at the things that are ailing the community between substance abuse and mental health and other issues and adverse child situations. So in the place of these bad habits, what are good habits we can put in place in the community? What better businesses can we bring so that way people will want to stick around? So children have places they can go to, so they can look around at Ukiah and look at it from childhood as somewhere they'd like to stay. Looking at the beautiful green spaces we have and how walkable and bikeable it is. Keeping it somewhere that they feel safe and respected and that they're able to grow educationally and professionally.
Thank you. Thank you, Chao-Fee. And rebuttals? You guys are good. This next one gets a little trickier. Should our city limits be expanded? Please support your answer with why. This will begin with Juan Orozco.
Thank you. I have spoken to several residents that live both in the north end of town and south end of town. And they do say they would want to be annexed to the city of Ukiah for several reasons. They think they already believe they are. It's hard to see any difference from one side or the other, but the other situation that they are in that is difficult for them is to have services that us in the city of Ukiah enjoy, and they want to be able to have those services as well. And of course, the more numbers we have in the city, their voice, they feel that their voice will count more by being part of the city of Ukiah.
Thank you, Juan Orozco. Mari Roden.
This is an incredibly complex issue, and it's one of my favorite issues, land use. So I'm going to try and squeeze in a few reasons. First of all, I absolutely support annexation and the expansion of the city limits. And one of the reasons for that is that, like we were saying earlier, the city limits has only 16,000 people, but there are about 40,000 people who come into the city to work and shop and go to school, and they have impacts on our city. And yet we don't get to collect property tax from those people. So if the city's bigger, it helps fund the services that all these people who come into our city rely on. Okay, so that's one. Another is that we all feel like we're part of the same community, like Juan was saying. People who live over by the high school, but outside the city limits, or even in Calpella, they feel like they live in Ukiah. And they have the same vision for what the Ukiah Valley is, but the county has different standards for development than the city does. So we want a unified community. We need to be one.
Thank you, Mari Roden.
We need more time too.
Got to really think it through. Susan Shur.
Well, I'm going to take a very micro approach. Where I live in the Wagon Cellar neighborhood is just on the border of the Brush Street Triangle, which is one of the areas considered to be annexed. And I'm very concerned that it could be just piecemeal development instead of an overview. And so far there's just been spotty. There's a storage facility and there's some housing, and it could be a mess if we don't have a great comprehensive overview of what's going to happen to that area. I'm also very concerned about the amount of traffic pouring. This is for my own selfish reasons, but if any of you know the saga of the Orr Street Bridge, which I won't get into, there's not nearly enough time, but there could be a lot of traffic pouring in from development in the Bush Street Triangle to the surrounding neighborhoods in the northeast corner, people going into the Pear Tree Shopping Center. So it really behooves us to take this very slowly.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan Shur. Taufi.
I would say yes to the land annexation, not that I have terribly new information to contribute than the other candidates have, but looking at the city, is it growing at a rate that it can support? So it seems yes would be good in terms of consolidation of resources and taxing, and that there would be more space and land available both for housing and just for other resources. But looking at the city and understanding if the places it is looking to get annexed we will be able to support the growth there and issues such as traffic, for example.
Thank you, Taufi. Jim Brown.
So Ukiah is almost built out. We are pretty much all at our city limits right now. Annexation is crucial to Ukiah. One thing annexation will do, it will control sprawl. We will be able to protect our open spaces by controlling where we build and use smart growth. We will be able to expand our municipalities, our water, our sewer, and our electricity to these hours and have a much more robust municipality system. I really believe that annexation, especially 20 years down the road, is going to be very vital for the economic growth of Ukiah, keeping Ukiah a very robust, vibrant city. It will attract many more businesses, many more restaurants, much more retail. And we have housing develops that are on the peripheral of being built that will support annexation as I envision it. It's a big deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim Brown. Quick rebuttals. Okay, we've got a lot of questions from the attendees this evening. The first one is pretty complicated. This will start with Mari Roden, and it concerns the police department. There's been scandals involving our police department. What is the city council's role in the selection of our officers, and what can be done to mitigate what's going on?
Well, we've had a few bad apples, but that doesn't mean that the whole barrel is spoiled, first of all. Second of all, I'm happy to say that we have an ad hoc committee. Councilmember Brown and I are on the committee, and we that is going to oversee the process of hiring. And this is going to be a process that is involving stakeholders from the community, and it's going to be open, transparent, and we are going to wind up with a police chief that everybody can support and be proud of. I'm sure of it.
Thank you, Mari Roden. Susan Shur.
I think the police chief is one aspect, and I'm glad to hear he or she will be vetted very carefully, but there seems to be a systemic problem with the entire department, that we've had so many credible accusations of sex harassment and sexual assault. This is not, I know this happens in some departments, but this is really horrific. And I don't really want to comment on the Sergeant Murray situation. We don't have all the facts, but I think it is a little suspicious that a former police officer is getting such a great deal from the criminal justice system. It seems like there's a problem with the internal affairs that, we have skyrocketing litigation costs. There have been several very large settlements, and we as the residents are paying for these. We're going to have increased insurance premiums. So I think there should be a better process for resolving citizen complaints. And I volunteered for several years on the San Francisco Department of Police Accountability.
Thank you, Susan Shur. Taufi.
For the city police, I think there is a need to understand what's going on. So for example, actually getting feedback on other police officers. How is their experience working with the city of Ukiah Police? Getting feedback from the people who use police services. That's one way of just understanding what's currently going on, because we have to work with what we have with the city of police. We're not just going to wipe them all out. So in understanding and working with them better, we also want to look at how can we make our Ukiah citizens feel safe again? That's who the city of police are serving. They're serving the people. So what can we learn about what's currently going on inside the city of police? How can we vet for police officers who really understand the city of Ukiah's needs and show that they actually care about the people that they're supposed to be serving?
Thank you, Tafi. Jim Brown?
Boy, what a tragic set of events that we've gone through regarding our police department recently. And it's sad, but we do have a lot of good people working for our police department, as Mari mentioned. And we are going to be doing our due diligence to hiring the best police chief we can for this community. We have identified numerous stakeholders in the community that our ad hoc committee is working with the hiring committee, that we'd be reaching out and asking them, what do you want in a police chief? What's good for your community? And we are going to take all that information and we are going to make the best hire that we possibly can. We will change the culture of our police department. A few bad apples did wreck this bushel, and it's being pointed out in the media and in the newspapers every day. Unfortunately, too many people believe that as that's the gospel for the whole department. It's not. We're going to change it. We're going to make it good. We love our community. We're going to keep you safe.
Thank you, Jim Brown. Juan Orozco.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think it's just sad, it's embarrassing. And we really need, I'm really glad that we have a diversity and equity committee now that has been asked to also represent that committee in the hiring of a police chief. And so that's a result of having a diversity and equity committee, that we have someone that represents the several groups that are represented in that committee, which are about 9 different ethnic groups, not all ethnic groups, but age groups and special needs groups that are represented. And we chose one person that will be part of that hiring committee, and really glad, I'm really hopeful that we'll do a better job at picking the right person.
Thank you, Juan Orozco. Well, we will move on to our next question. There's a lot of comments from the participants, attendees this evening. So starting with Susan Shur, what are your top 3 priorities?
Well, that's a great question. I would say climate change is up there. I don't know. Well, it's hard to say climate change should not be the top priority. I'd like to see the city have more solar arrays with backup battery storage. I'd like to see more emphasis on walkability and safe streets. And as we talked about, using the climate emergency resolution to weigh the value of public works projects. The police department certainly is huge, because I think it's tainted our attitude towards safety and equity. And also, I think the issue, an overarching issue of transparency is really crucial. I've noticed the city has not done a very good job of explaining public works projects to the residents it's actually affecting. I've had in my chats with potential voters, people don't know when.
Thank you, Susan Shur. Tafi.
Okay, my priorities being a city council member would be, well, affordable housing is a big complex issue to address. So really I'm going to sum it down to workforce development and economic development in Ukiah, since housing can't be addressed all at once. But we want to see better, more caring businesses come in to refresh Ukiah, bring in more services, the youth. So again, our young people, those under 18, people with families and have their kids here. Things for the kids to do to keep them out of trouble, but not just things for them to do, activities that are fun, that are engaging, build a sense of community, and develop their own leadership and education, and build them into better students and citizens. Lastly, our green space, which will hopefully mitigate climate change, will help higher resiliency, and keep Ukiah beautiful, keeping it green, and emphasis on our parks and recreation, because we have 9 of them, but I think only a few of them are used in totality.
Thank you, Taufi. Jim Brown.
Well, strong economic growth, I think is vitally important. As I mentioned in my opening statement, it promotes a healthy community, strong public safety, sound infrastructure, and recreational activities. Affordable housing is right up there. It's in my top 3. And the reason I mention that is because I think it's paramount for job recruitment and job retention. Nobody likes having to hire and then have somebody move to another county for more money. If we can hire them and keep them here, we're doing a heck of a job. So affordable housing, annexation, I mentioned that earlier. I think that's vitally important, especially for Ukiah 20 years down the road. And then I got to throw in there number 4, mental health. We need to address the mental health. And if we can address the mental health, it's going to help tremendously with the homelessness. So those are my top.
Thank you, Jim Brown. Juan Orozco.
Thank you. Housing, definitely. My 3 things is housing, quality of life in the city of Ukiah, and health and safety fairness for all. For housing, support new housing construction, and especially new affordable rentals, and build on already properly zoned areas. Quality of life, support businesses for jobs to enhance our town, and appreciate our clean air and healthy and friendly neighborhoods. Healthy and safety fairness, protect our water, groundwater wells, our creeks, our rivers, the Par Valley Diversion Project in Lake Mendocino. And we all can work together in our neighborhoods to slow down traffic as well, and support trails and paths for hikers and pedestrians and bicyclists.
Thank you, Juan Orozco. Mari Roden.
Well, first would be complete streets and climate. They're interrelated. Our public streets need to be safe and accessible to users of all ages. Again, whether they're walking, cycling, or driving, especially in the face of climate change when we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So I want to work with staff and the community to, to implement those kinds of changes. Homelessness, I support continuing to work with the county, as I said, and the homeless continuum of care to ensure that unhoused people, individuals get the supports they need to enable them to live stably in permanent housing. And then of course, housing, we talked about that. That's another top priority. And then the police chief, because Ukiahans deserve a police force and a chief that they trust and respect. And we need a process for hiring our chief that's open and transparent, which is what we're embarking on. Thanks.
Thank you, Mari Roden. This next question is very interesting. Apparently, most of the traffic lights in town have devices that appear to be cameras. What restrictions, if any, would you propose or support on the use by our city government of any photos or videos on these? Is there any controls on this? And we'll start with Taufi.
I am not knowledgeable on this particular matter. However, it does seem there's been in other cities that I've traveled to, there's less and less of the camera street lights that occur. They're reducing them. So I guess that's something to consider. If other cities are reducing the use of them, what does that serve the city of Ukiah to continue to have images? That's just a question I raise, not knowing myself.
Yeah. Thank you. Jim Brown.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, so the cameras on the traffic lights are for police use only. They do not register speeders or anything like that. The police use them whenever crimes have been committed, and they go back to the dispatch and they run the tape, and they can identify the vehicles who are leaving the area. So they are not used against the public. They are used to fight crime. And that's the specific and only use for the cameras.
Thank you. Juan Orozco.
Yes, that is my understanding. Not only that's the sole purpose, but also records are not kept indefinitely. The records are deleted once investigation is done, and they're not either open for the public. These records are protected.
Thank you. Mari Roden.
Well, so maybe the part of the question that applies at this point is how do we feel if would we want to have cameras? And I have mixed views about it. I think, if these cameras that are up there now have a deterrent effect, I think that's a great thing. Maybe we shouldn't publicize the fact that we don't use them for that purpose. But so anyway, I guess I have mixed feelings on the issue, but there are so many speeders in the city of Ukiah that if people believe that there are cameras up there, I totally support that as a way of controlling speeding.
Thank you. Susan Shur?
Well, I also have mixed feelings about it. From a civil libertarian perspective, I find it very troubling that we don't know when our photos are being taken when we're in our cars. But on the other hand, on a different note, I've encountered 4 instances of Nazi graffiti on structures on the rail trail within the last 2 months. And I would be thrilled to get someone's photo of that. So at that point, I guess it depends on what the issue. I would say screw civil liberties. I want these people nabbed. But it's surprising that it seems like very few of us, maybe those on the council, knew that. I don't know how many folks in the audience knew about that. I find it troubling that we haven't been informed that our photos may be taken when we're in our cars. And that again goes to the issue of transparency.
And rebuttal.
My rebuttal, it just has to do with informing the public, and that it's really difficult for the city to, often the city puts out press releases that don't get published, or tries in the ways that it has access to get information out, putting information on the website. So it's I don't believe that the city isn't transparent or is trying to hide anything. I think it's just very difficult to get the information out to the public.
We're going to move on to a couple of questions about the environment. There's a lot of concern about that. This question has to do with insulation and housing or building with alternative products that provide great insulation as opposed to using more green energy for heating and cooling. So what it boils down to is the rules of our building department. So beginning with Jim Brown, what do you think, what is the relationship between the city council and the rules of our building department when it comes to permitting to allow alternative means of construction that might be more energy efficient than our typical approach now?
I don't know. But I can look into it. I mean, our building officials, they're professionals. They follow the building codes. I'm sure that there are certain materials that are approved for insulation, other materials not approved. I know the house that I live in, I have trees. I don't have any insulation, so that I don't have a problem with that. I'm assuming that the material this person is wondering about is either flammable or
No, it's
toxic.
specifically Adobe, actually.
Adobe.
Yeah, but you build an Adobe house, you don't need heating and cooling.
I apologize. I'm not an expert on insulation. I can't answer the question intelligently, but if somebody wants to ask me, and I'll get an answer.
Okay, Juan Orozco, do you have any knowledge on this subject?
Not a whole lot either. I do know that our development commission deals with many of these things, and the council, as the question was voiced, what does the city have to do? Does he have to do much with the building codes? And is really just we're asked, we had to approve any funding or applying for funding, but is usually the development commission that works with that.
Thank you, Mari. Odin?
Would you please repeat the question?
What is the relationship between the power of the city council and our building department and the rules on permitting alternative types of construction? If there is an approach where, let's say Adobe is the example, I don't think it's currently legal to build an Adobe house. So we have to build according to what our building department will permit.
I think the city council doesn't have a lot of room in that the building codes come from the state, the earthquake requirements and sprinklers and all those sorts of things are all imposed by the state. And so our building official is enforcing mostly state mandates. And I think that the city council has the leeway to make things stricter, but we can't make things less strict. That's what I think. I'm not positive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Susan Shur?
Is not my area of expertise either. I think the questioner stumped most of us here. But on a related note, it seems like a great time with rebates available from the surplus in the state budget that for anyone who wants to install heat pumps or electric water heaters, there's money out there, or electric cars or charging stations at home. So it's really a great time to be paying attention to preventive climate change measures. I don't know how that really applies to building entire structures, but I do know people who live outside the city limits who have Adobe houses and they're permanent houses. So that's probably all I have to say on this. This was definitely the toughest question.
Thank you. Tafi?
Based on this tough question and not knowing any more than the candidates and council members know, it seems like this would be a good opportunity for the Planning Commission and the City Council to build just a more transparent and communicative relationship, and also to make it easy for citizens to find out these kind of answers. So that way, if someone is interested in building with an alternative type of construction, they know what they can and cannot do.
Thank you very much. And you were the first on this one. I'm starting to get confused here. I believe we start with Juan Orozco on this next question. There are some questions about plans for our local schools, how to invest in our children's future. And I believe this would take into consideration also public schools, charter schools. Like, what is your vision for education in our city?
Yes, thank you for the question. Some of our schools allow children to come to their school if they're in the surrounding areas. Transportation is provided only from the closest to the school for children. I see that as an issue for families that want to have their children in a certain school across the town. And so I think we need to look into that situation. I know charter schools, they don't offer public transportation, so parents are free to take their children to those schools from wherever they're at. For building the schools, we have plenty. We don't have enough children enrolled in the schools. So we have plenty of room for children. So I don't feel like that we need more schools built.
Thank you. Mari Roden?
I have two thoughts on the issue. One, probably the most important is the Board of Trustees. And I know that I'm not sure what happened, but if there is a candidate right now to fill one of the seats on the Ukiah Unified Board of Trustees, but it's been difficult to fill seats, and we need really well-qualified people to sit on the Board of Trustees for the school district. Secondly, I think the school district is proposing to go out for a parcel tax in getting more funding, and I support that because our schools are one of the main, it's an economic development tool. I mean, having good quality schools is gonna bring business here. It's gonna make families wanna move here and raise their children here. So we have to keep our schools well-funded.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Susan Shur?
Well, of course, the city council doesn't have jurisdiction over the public school system. That's the Ukiah Unified School District Board of Trustees. But, I want to give a shout out for our teachers and administrators of the school district. I think they've done a fabulous job to keep the school district afloat during COVID under just horrific circumstances. The school district also, I was delighted to see the green school bus coming down my street the other day. It's this cute school bus, but it has a green bumper in the front and the back, and it was completely quiet, no emissions, and I was just jumping for joy. And I thought, I was so happy that we have a school district that's actually going for alternative energy vehicles. I think we're probably in a class by ourselves in that. And I'd like the city to take a cue from the school district to be that forward thinking.
Thank you. Taufi?
I met Superintendent, MCOE Superintendent Michelle a few weeks ago, and she said one of her concerns for the schools is that test scores are down greatly for students. So perhaps there's a way this will further push Ukiah to get broadband to another resource to enhance our students' learning. I really think it's important for students to get internship opportunities or just more development as they're a student. So emphasizing career technical education as they're students in Ukiah, what can they do with their education? Where can they go in the world? Where can they see helping? So activities and education for students, I think I'm very, very, very pro getting students out into the world, seeing what they can do and seeing the skills that they can develop. And re-emphasizing that in the classroom as well.
Thank you. Jim Brown?
Question I want to try to answer it. So schools form our children. You know, our children spend a lot of time in the schools. I think our schools do a bang up job here in the Ukiah Valley of providing them an education, recreational activities, and other outside activities. They guide them to be better people. There is some concern I heard about recently about falling enrollment, which is unfortunate. I don't know the reason for that. I know a lot of people are leaving California, if that's part of the reason. I do not know where charter schools play a role in the declining enrollment. Would be really, really nice if they could work more closely together. I don't know if that's can happen. I'm not on top of the school issues, other than I think that our school district does a pretty good job of schooling our children.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the section for questions submitted. There were a lot more. Thank you for participating. I think when these guys are on their way out, you can probably buttonhole them to get a little bit more information. And I do know that every candidate wants to hear the thoughts of the community. We're going to now move on to closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and we will begin with Mari Roden.
I have served on our city council for a total of 13 years. In that time, I've worked with my fellow city council members, residents, and city staff to move forward dozens of policies. Most recently, an ordinance spanning sales of nitrous oxide canisters or whippets, a climate emergency resolution to accelerate the city's efforts to address climate change impacts, and an approach to street design called Complete Streets to make our streets safe and accessible to all users. Looking ahead, I will continue to work with stakeholders on policies to increase the housing supply. I will push for continued cooperation with the county to address homelessness. And critically, if elected, I will continue on the ad hoc committee overseeing the new police chief selection process to ensure it's transparent and results in a hire our whole community can enthusiastically support. My knowledge and experience have given me an appreciation of the complexities of our challenges and clarified the pathways to success. Building a better Ukiah will take everyone doing what they can, and I'm prepared to do my part as your council member. I'm proudly endorsed by the Mendocino County Democratic Party and the Inland Mendocino Democratic Club. I ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Shur.
So I've been talking to a lot of people as I've been campaigning, people from all different socioeconomic backgrounds and ethnic groups. And I like to ask people what their concerns are. And an issue that's come up often that I just alluded to briefly before is the lack of transparency and availability of information. And I respectfully disagree with Mari. I don't think it's a matter of people not paying attention. For example, my street, Clara Avenue, is about to undergo a massive reconstruction project. And I think it's safe to say I'm the only one on the street who knows it's happening. So there's a problem. People are unaware of projects planned for their own neighborhood that has an impact on their lives. And why is this? For example, repaving the streets that recently has been done all over town is great, but we need effective prior notice of a little thing like what streets will be closed. I've attended a lot of council meetings as an observer, and I don't know if you can all see this plaque that has this wonderful phrase that says, "We are here to serve you." And I've always been very inspired by that. So I've been asking myself, what does it mean to serve? To me, it means being responsive to concerns and questions. It means having a wider open door to encourage more public participation. It means that the council is not just a ceremonial body that approves staff actions with little discussion or questions. So I believe firmly that we need better checks and balances between staff and the council. A more engaged council is vital to a truly democratic process. In my work as a lawyer, I had several cases that lasted many years against great odds. And from those experiences, I learned to be patient and diligent. I look forward to putting those skills to good use on the council. Thank you.
Calfee?
I love living in Ukiah and want to improve the quality of life here for the community. The items that I will advocate for are emphasizing workforce development, youth activities and education, and then our beautiful outdoors. I'd like to have the community better engaged so they know what's going on and so they can participate as well. With the fresh perspective and collective wisdom of council members, we can bring forth positive change by being responsive, reasonable, and responsible. I'm committed to helping build a healthier community and hope to be of service to the people and city of Ukiah. Thank you.
Jim Brown?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm running for my third term. I really wasn't going to run for a third term, but there is so much good work being done. We've had some bumps in the road, but there's so much good stuff being done. It needs to continue. I think I have the expertise to keep the trend going to where Ukiah is going to get better and better and better. One thing I've learned about being a council member, it's not really a political position. It's not a us versus them job, and it is a job. It is what's best for the Ukiah Valley. And that's where I'm putting my emphasis right now, is because hopefully we expand Ukiah and make it Ukiah Valley. And like several of the council members already mentioned tonight, everybody's Ukiahan. It's not a city Ukiah versus a Ukiah Valley person. This is Ukiah Valley. And I want to make sure that Ukiah Valley is a great place to live for a long time to come. And I'm gonna be here to support that. So I really would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Bristol?
Yes, thank you. The Latino residents of Ukiah is the fast ever growing Latino ethnic group, and it needs to be represented at all levels of our government. My commitment to our community encourages others to take a part in their civic obligations as citizens of Ukiah. The new generations of Latinos need role models. The city of Ukiah has tremendously improved access to services for non-English speakers. I've had the honor of ribbon cutting and inaugurating the opening of the streetscape in the downtown area as I was the mayor at the time. And I've been instrumental in starting a diversity and equity committee for our city. During my tenure, a lot of affordable housing has been made available in several locations in the city. The Doris Street currently being repaved, and water line replacements and ADA compliant wheelchair ramps done. I've been done while I've been on the city council. I've supported many of the projects now finished, as well as those that are currently in progress for our city. And I'm proud of the acquisition of the properties of the Western Hills for nature preservation and recreation. I put countless hours in building the new hiking trails and the property in the Western Hills. And I urge you to keep the city council as diverse as it is now, and vote on November 8th. And I have literature up in the front, and a clipboard for endorsements and cards that you can take as you go out. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. So, I'm Wendy Dewitt with the Mendocino Women's Political Coalition. On behalf of MWPC, AAUW, and the Mendocino Voice, we thank you for coming this evening. And we encourage you to read, listen to our local radio programs, get to know the candidates, be involved, share information with your neighbors, and vote. Thank you for coming, and thank you to our candidates.